Celebrating 49 years on the air, award-winning Farm Week is a production of Mississippi State University Extension.
Today on Farm Week, we conclude our series, The Hungriest State, the future for Mississippi fishermen, not a pretty picture. In Southern gardening, you might not be able to spell the word variegated, but you sure can tell what it means. Plus, if you suspect the crop mix around the country might be shifting, guess what? You're right. And back on our series, the potential collapse of the Mississippi fishing industry, Farm Week starts right now.
Hello everyone, I'm Zach Ashmore.
And I'm Mike Russell. Great to have you with us again here on Farm Week. This week, the concluding stories from our series, The Hungriest State. In this episode of The Fisherfolk, we focus on those trying to make a living in Mississippi's fishing industry. We pick up with Ben Posadas of Mississippi State University, who paints a grim picture for the industry itself.
I went through almost every major seafood product being consumed in the country. Compared our production here by our growers or by our fishermen and the imports that we buy from everywhere, the price that wholesalers pay for our growers and the price that our wholesalers pay for those imported products. One country sells it at half the price of what we sell here in the U.S. U.S. product, foreign country A, half. Foreign country B, 75%. So who can compete with that? There's no way. So the margins are getting slimmer and slimmer. Sometimes 1 cent, 2 cents, maybe 5 cents per dollar sale. That's hard, you know. The captain, a crew, and maybe another crew, and maybe another, depending on the size of the boat. A 5 cent per dollar sale profit is not good enough to keep them in the boat. It's gonna kill this industry here.
What do you think the coast is going to look like in 15 years? Like, when in the next few generations, what do you think is going to happen?
Less boat. Yeah, for sure. Because I see a lot of people that with the older generation had gone out, had retired. So, and a lot of people have been selling their boat from left to right. It's not continuing. The shrimping business is not continuing in the family. It's not being carry on. The generation's not carry on.
You used the term graying of the fleet. What is that term? What does it mean?
It means, my hair is gray here, means the folks working in the fleet are getting older and older over time. And no younger ones are coming and joining the fleet to fish.
Graying of the fleet is a very huge problem. Like I said, when I was 26 years old, I bought my first big shrimp boat, and man, I was the youngest guy out there with this big old boat. And here it is 20 years later, and I'm still the youngest guy out there. Look behind me, and there's not a whole lot of guys coming up. And it's kind of scary.
Right now, what we hear from the fishing families is they don't want their children even going on the boats. They want them to go to college and learn another trade because it's been so difficult on this current generation that they don't want their kids to have to experience what they've been going through.
The new generation see how hard their parents had to work for it and not make enough. Yeah, they don't want that. They want a stable job, you know, that can meet the ends instead of working their butt off and at the end nothing.
I can tell you, just like any young person or anybody for that matter, they want to work and they want to get paid for their work. And this industry here has become more like gambling. And you're rolling the dice, and people don't like to work and not get paid. And so you can't blame them for that.
Do your children want to fish?
Not really. They don't want to do it full time. They don't. I mean, they will help out, you know, until we find a deck hand, you know. But finding a really good deck hand nowadays is hard because they're not catching enough to pay for the deck hand. So actually, my kids are working for food. So yeah. So to keep this business alive, everybody had to do. The family had to pitch in. They work together until we find a better solution.
If your sons don't take over this business or this boat, what happens to the business or the boat?
We probably eventually have to sell it. You know, if my husband can no longer go out because, you know, to the aging, you know, getting older, or because of the health reason, then we probably have to sell it. If the kids doesn't take over.
It's hard for young folk to decide and join to become even a crew of a fishing boat. Because the choice is, there are other things that they can do. As life becomes good for these families, they can afford to send their kids to Ole Miss, Mississippi State, and those nice universities, and earn nice degrees, doctors, lawyers, pharmacists. So once they graduate, there's no way they're gonna go back and go fishing.
When I look at the graying of the fleet and the impacts on the long-term viability of the industry, I really am concerned. I've been ringing the alarm bells about this for the past 5 years. I think that in 10 years, if we don't see a course correction, we're going to be in absolute dire straits. With the average age of the fishermen, commercial fishermen, around 54 years of age, 5 more years will put that around 60. And that's getting at a place that's is going to be what I would call irreparable harm to the industry, that we may never recover from that.
Well, just like any household, children, they know that their parents are getting older. They don't pay much attention about that. But once their parents die, that's when they realize our parents dead. It's the same way with the fleet. We don't pay much attention to the graying of the fleet. We just pay lip service. Oh, we got some funding for them, we got some training for them. If the young folks come and join, fine. If not, But when these folks are gone, they're gone.
A grim picture indeed. Will Mississippi's fishing industry collapse? We ask that question in our concluding episode later in the show.
In Southern Gardening, you don't need one of these, a dictionary, to find out what the word variegated means. In fact, all you really have to do is look at plants like the ones Eddie Smith is showcasing this week. Here's Eddie with an explanation.
If you haven't picked up on it yet, I love variegated plants. They are a stunning addition to any garden or indoor space. Variegated plants feature leaves that display multiple colors or a range of shades of the same color, creating a striking visual display. The varied coloring can be seen as stripes, patches, or even speckles, making each plant unique. One of my favorites, variegated wax ivy, has leaves with a unique color pattern that sets them apart from other plants. The leaves display a combination of bright green and creamy white, creating a striking contrast that draws the eye. The variegation is not uniform, but rather appears in a random pattern, giving each leaf a unique, individualized appearance. The leaves themselves are small and waxy, with a glossy surface that reflects light beautifully. Their unique coloration and texture make them a great addition to any plant collection. Another favorite, variegated brake fern, has leaves variegated with shades of green and white, which create a beautiful contrast. The variegated pattern on the leaves can be symmetrical or asymmetrical, which adds to the plant's visual interest. The white color on the leaves is due to the lack of chlorophyll in those areas, which is responsible for the green color on the rest of the leaf. The amount of white on the leaves can vary depending on the plant's age, light exposure, and overall health. I hope you will agree, variegated plants can make a stunning addition to any garden or indoor space. I'm Eddie Smith, and I will see you next time on Southern Gardening.
We'll take a break right here, but don't go away. Coming up, our final segment of the Fisherfolk, part of our series, The Hungriest State. We'll talk to Frank Parker and Maria Tran and others about what the future is already looking like for Mississippi's fishermen. It's not necessarily a pretty picture. The graying of the fleet and the possible collapse of the Mississippi fishing industry. The Hungriest State, the conclusion, coming up on Farm Week. Don't go away.
I believe in people and their hopes, their aspirations and their faith, and their right to make their own plans and arrive at their own decisions, and their ability and power to enlarge their lives and plan for the happiness of those they love. I believe that education, of which extension work is an essential part, is basic in stimulating individual initiative, self-determination, and leadership. That these are the keys to democracy, and that people, when given facts they understand, will act not only in their self-interest, but also in the interest of society. Because I believe these things, I am an extension professional.
I believe in people and their hopes, their aspirations, and their faith. I believe in intellectual freedom to search for and present the truth without bias and with courteous tolerance toward the views of others. I believe that education is a lifelong process, and the greatest university is the home. That my success as a teacher is proportional to those qualities of mind and spirit that give me welcome entrance to the homes of the families I serve. Because I believe these things, I am an extension professional.
Just a couple of weeks ago, the USDA held one of its largest gatherings, its annual Outlook Forum. There it provided acreage estimates, and it's becoming clearer that crops are shifting for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is profitability. Here's Colleen Bradford-Krantz with more.
America's cropland is slowly shifting. Of the nation's top 10 crops by planted acres, only 3 have gained ground in the last quarter century: corn, soybeans, and canola. The rest, hay, wheat, cotton, sorghum, rice, oats, and barley, have all lost acres to these expanding crops, development, or other uses since 2000. Lost ground doesn't always mean lost production thanks to improved yields, but it does show how clearly the nation has shifted from 4 dominant crops to just 2, as corn and soybeans push into new territory, primarily replacing wheat and hay. Bruce Haynes, who farms 800 acres near Mitchell, South Dakota, reluctantly dropped hard red winter wheat from his crop rotation a few years ago.
Typically, a third of my crop would have been wheat. And so, I would have been farming 240 acres of wheat a year. None this year. It's been 3 years since I raised wheat.
He's not alone. This animation from USDA's Cropland Cross tool, set to run from 2007 to 2024, illustrates how wheat is disappearing from eastern South Dakota.
In this country, we've been raising wheat since the settlers got here at the turn of the century. And all of a sudden, marketing challenges and weather challenges of profitability kind of stands in the way of wheat acres. And so we've moved more into the soybean and corn rotation.
Projecting forward, corn and soybeans could jump from a combined 58% of major cropland acres today to 68% by 2050, though dietary preferences, policy shifts, economic forces, and weather could change that picture. Haynes, a board member for the South Dakota Soybean Research and Promotion Council, isn't worried about corn and soybean dominance. He says farmers must make smart economic decisions, not emotional ones. A soybean crushing plant, High Plains Processing, recently opened near Haynes' farm, eliminating the need to ship soybeans by rail to West Coast ports.
We have those renewable fuel plants. Those are local markets, and so within 3 miles of my farm, they're going to crush 35 million bushels of soybeans. And, we know that market is going to be there.
That kind of infrastructure encourages more farmers to plant those crops. And when other crops disappear from a region, the supply chain infrastructure often goes with it, making them harder to bring back. Some argue nations can specialize if the world functions as a smooth global market. Others worry that politics, weather, or conflict could disrupt that trade. Sarah Cardin, Research and Policy Director at Farm Action, sees signs that USDA is becoming more willing to also support higher-value, labor-intensive crops like fruits and vegetables, products the U.S. increasingly imports.
The recently announced bailout of $12 billion included $1 billion explicitly for specialty crop producers as a set-aside. That's an exception. That's not, if you go back to the era of Trump 1 and we had a trade war and a bailout, that wasn't there. So that's a big change, right? Just this acknowledgement that there are other types of producers out there that have high input costs. They do have market challenges.
Without greater crop diversity, Cardin worries the U.S. will continue to deepen its agricultural trade deficit.
They were projecting in 2024 a $32 billion agricultural trade deficit. Because specialty crops are more valuable, you would only need to shift about 0.4% of the cropland into specialty crops just to balance that trade deficit.
Cardin says global specialization works until something changes. Nations then discover how dependent they have become on one another.
That's very much like our relationship with Mexico, for instance. We grow a lot of cheap corn for them to import as feed, and they grow a lot of fruits and vegetables for us to import. We've lost sovereignty. They've lost sovereignty. It creates a problematic power dynamic, I think.
Since 2015, the USDA has offered whole farm revenue protection insurance, in part designed to encourage greater agricultural diversity. In December 2025, the USDA Office of Inspector General found that the Risk Management Agency couldn't prove that its partner independent crop insurance agents were consistently offering the program to producers. The RMA agrees with the orders that it now must require agents to track that they offer all insurance options. In the meantime, Haynes continues watching for the right moment to bring wheat back into his rotation.
It's one of my favorite things to grow is in the springtime is wheat. There's nothing more beautiful than a wheat field. If you're raising it just to be pretty, that's good. But if you're raising it for cash, there's a shortcoming in that.
Now back to our series, The Hungriest State. More about why Mississippi's fisherfolk have faced such hard times. We pick up with Ryan Bradley, who explains the potential collapse of the industry looks like what we're seeing now, lack of profit and resulting decay.
You know, when I think about what the collapse of the seafood industry might be or what that may look like, we can already start to see pieces of that. If you ride around these harbors from coast to coast, you'll see some boats, shrimp boats and oyster boats beyond repair, rusted to heck and back. These fishermen, if they're not making money, they can't maintain these vessels, which they cost a lot of money to maintain each year. So we begin to lose these vessels. If they don't rot away, they're sold off and they're relocated to other parts of the country. About 25 years ago, we had over 2,000 licensed commercial shrimp fishermen in the state of Mississippi. Today, we have about 300, with about half of those being active. So we're really just a fraction of what we used to be just 25 years ago.
What would the collapse of the Mississippi seafood industry mean for the food security of the Mississippi Gulf Coast?
The way of life, consumption patterns of seafood as well as other commodities will drastically change. Trade and industry will be changed. There's going to be a lot of people who are now employed in the industry, from harvesting to processing to wholesaling to seafood markets, restaurants. Those jobs will be gone. And those revenues that the government gets, local, state, and federal, they'll be gone. There will be more need for welfare checks, and that's not good. That's not good.
But bigger than that, what does that mean for our local food supply? The pandemic really highlighted how important our local food supply chains really are. And many people saw when they went to their supermarkets during the height of that pandemic, they couldn't find beef, they couldn't find chicken, they couldn't find pork. But our boats were out working, and those people, when they couldn't find food, they were lined up at these docks, they were lined up at our seafood dealers, and they were stocking their freezers full of local seafood. You can only imagine if we got in a situation worse than what we're in at that time, how bad things could become without our local food supplies being strong and robust. And so that's why I'm proud to advocate for domestic wild seafood, because I understand how important it is for our local food supply chains. And so we always encourage people to ask who and where your seafood came from. It has such a huge economic impact on the coast. And I tell people this all the time, is the more that we can keep our dollars in the state, the stronger our state economy becomes. It's going to take a lot of work protecting the environment. I think that's our #1 threat right now. We've got to do a lot more than we're currently doing to stop the pollution of our waters. But then we've got to work to train and educate and probably retool the industry to be prepared for the future. That's not going to be the silver bullet, but it's a starting point. And we got to start educating our children that this is a viable career path. And we have to enlighten our politicians on the needs of the industry, because it's a shame to me to have the seafood industry here as one of the most, that built the coast, is so influential on the coast. It seems like we're forgotten now, and it's more about the tourism. And it's something that we should never take for granted, because as we're seeing, it can definitely slip away from us.
Man is smart. As long as they work together, we develop technologies to exploit resources around us to feed mankind. It's tough though. It's gonna be hard for everyone, but I think we'll be able to survive.
A tough industry for all kinds of reasons, but if government can ease regulations, a turnaround may be possible. Well, next week, a lighter story, the 2026 Dixie National Sale of Junior Champions.
It's always a big story, and this year the numbers were bigger than ever. Well, more than $500,000 raised in the sale.
You'll also meet Julian Chavez, a hardworking young man absolutely bound for greatness. Trust us, you will enjoy everything this young man has to say. The 2026 Dixie National next time on Farm Week.
Remember, if you missed a story, look for past episodes of Farm Week on our website at farmweek.tv.
And don't forget to follow us on Facebook and YouTube. See you next week. Thanks for watching.